Pachacuti and Inca Imperial Policy. Pachacuti, the Earthshaker, led the Incas on a series of successful conquests to consolidate the Andes and forge the largest empire in the Americas. The Inca Empire was one of the most impressive civilizations known to man, encompassing a territory approximately 906,000 square kilometers, from the northern borders of Ecuador to the Maule River of Chile. When the Spanish first landed in the Andes in 1524 AD, they found that nearly the entirety of the region had been conquered and was now ruled by a singular state, the Inca Empire. Through a mix of imperial militarism and shrewd diplomacy, the founding peoples of the empire had managed to achieve all this in just a century and showed no signs of stopping. The man who started this legacy was none other than Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, ninth ruler of the Kingdom of Cusco. Before Pachacuti and the Incas, the Andean region was one of the harshest and most severe environments in the world. Missing from the mountain range were key farm animals such as cattle and oxen, and climate varied wildly as one traveled across the land. With arid deserts and Amazonian tropics impenetrable to even the strongest of armies, human habitation was almost always a struggle for survival. In the time of Pachacuti, a multitude of cultures fought and lived in pre-Columbian Peru. The great empires of the Wari and Tiwanaku had collapsed, creating a power vacuum that would result in a series of wars and fragmentation historians would term the Late Intermediate Period. As mentioned, the Late Intermediate Period was a dangerous time as the Andes were thrown into chaos. The region was populated with a variety of peoples, with various idiosyncrasies and regional loyalties. The Wari had long ruled these groups, keeping the peace with a strong central authority and demanding the utmost loyalty from all its subjects. With their great wealth and prowess for engineering, they terraformed the land and built terraces for agriculture and a road network for logistics. With all their power, they left an enormous footprint on Andean civilization. But this could not stop the empire's eventual decline around the first millennium AD, for reasons largely unknown. It can't be stressed how monumental this collapse was for the landscape. For those familiar with their history, the post-Wari period can be likened to Warring States-era China or the European Dark Ages after the fall of the Romans. As infrastructure crumbled, regions broke apart. Violence increased, and local warlords stepped in to fill the void. This was the environment where Pachacuti and his empire would rise to power. 400 years after the Waris disappeared from the land, Pachacuti's father, Inca Viracocha, ruled over his subjects who had established a small settlement in the Cusco Valley. Viracocha's reign was largely uneventful, and the preceding Inca rulers had been more preoccupied with defending their territory than military conquests. Through a string of strategic alliances and marriages, they had managed to grow their village into a formidable kingdom. This was achieved through the authority of the Sapa Inca, the Incan sovereign, and the insights provided by the two military strategists and nobles, Apumaita and Vicacirao. To the west of Cusco, in a place now known as Andahuaylas, there was a group called the Chanca. With a series of successful battles, they had grown to become a formidable enemy, threatening Incan security. In the years before their war with the Incas, the Chanca had allied themselves with a variety of Central Andean groups and formed a strong confederacy. This was done under the leadership of the brothers Uscovilca and Ancovilca, shrewd generals whose Spanish adventurer Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa describes as robbers and cruel tyrants. These brothers had left the Chanca with a large army and capacity for war. Previous victories had emboldened the Chanca, and the Confederation now pushed up against the lands of the Inca, as any buffer states had either been conquered or allied themselves with the power. Sensing the time was right to strike, the Chanca marched on Cusco in an effort to plunder the capital. It is said that just before the attack, Inca Viracocha abandoned the city and fled to the neighboring Urubamba Valley, believing Cusco was lost. His son, known by his subjects as Inca Yupanqui at the time, disagreed. Inca Yupanqui stayed in Cusco, disobeying the wishes of his father, who chastised him for his foolishness. Just before the Chanca arrived, Inca Yupanqui spent time in meditation, praying to God and the sun before the coming battle. A vision appeared to the young man, assuring him of his victory, showing him the provinces he would conquer. Encouraged, he rallied the armies of Cusco in a last-ditch attempt to defend the city. The result was an astounding victory, through which Inca Yupanqui cemented his power and usurped his aging father and crown prince for their cowardice. Parading the defeated Chanca through the streets of Cusco, the new Sapa Inca would take on the name of Pachacuti, meaning revolution or earth shaker in Quechua. Pachacuti embarked on the warpath, fighting a series of battles that would subdue the Chanca and bring them under Incan authority. The Chanca-Inca War was a cataclysmic event, and one of the great insights of Pachacuti was just what this war had represented. The Chanca were a loose, decentralized confederation coming up against the organized might of the Incas. Since the collapse of the Juarez, it had been hundreds of years since any state had been able to lay claim to the whole Andes. While the old rulers were gone, remnants of their wealth still remained. Terraces still dotted the mountainside. The shrines of their ancient religion reminded passerby of an old ideology. The highways of their empire connected distant peoples, allowing runners the ability to relay messages between rulers and armies. With his victory over the Chanca, Pachacuti realized that he had not just won any war, but had gained the opportunity to embark on an imperial project. Encouraged, he would lead his armies onward to further victories. Taking advantage of a balkanized landscape, Pachacuti undertook a campaign in the Urubamba Valley in Vilcapampa immediately after the war. Under his leadership, the Incas conquered the divided tribes around them and expanded their territory north into the Peruvian highlands and south to Lake Titicaca. With the wealth gained from his military conquests, Pachacuti distributed gifts among the populace to secure loyalty and commissioned great works of construction. The emperor reorganized Cusco, dividing the city into 4 quarters, Suyu, that converged toward a central plaza. Streets were built, and the principal temple of the Inca religion, the House of the Sun, was renovated, endearing Pachacuti to the people. History was compiled such that there would be official accounts of the Incan past, an unbroken chain that would chronicle the inevitable rise of the empire. The result was a state ideology that would endure past Pachacuti's reign, forming the bedrock of Inca legitimacy. Another achievement of the Sapa Inca were the creation of large agricultural terraces of 200 paces or more in length and 20 to 30 wide. The projects increased the arable land of Cusco and allowed the city to produce great surpluses that would grow its wealth and allow the Incas to field large armies against their rivals. Pachacuti used a land and expand strategy when entering a new territory. Often he would win over the favor of a certain group and secure an alliance through strategic marriages and gifts. When the allegiance of the locals had been gained, the Inca often moved with them against their enemies, eliminating any sources of resistance. Treasure taken from these military campaigns would then be distributed back to the locals or recycled into the regional economy. Infrastructure would be built and agricultural yields would increase. Thus, the Incas would grow stronger after each conquest had been integrated into the heartland. This flywheel allowed the Inca to become an unstoppable force throughout the Andes, snowballing their past wins into the future. Settlers would be moved to rebellious provinces to quell insurrections. Consistently rebellious provinces would be met with unflinching punishment, often getting eliminated on Pachacuti's order. As time went on, Pachacuti would grant the status of Inca by privilege to loyal populations, considered a reward for their steadfastness. Inca by privilege was meant to elevate core allies who had proved their worth to a status just below or on equal terms to the Inca by blood. The original people of Cusco, who Pachacuti had led to victory against the Chanca. Marriages between the elites of these different groups with Incan royalty would further welcome them into the empire, and after a time these people thought of themselves as full-blooded Inca. With these steps, Pachacuti gradually unified the disparate Andean tribes and raised the numbers of the empire's official Inca population. Eventually, the young, battle-hungry man had aged. As the years passed by, Pachacuti found himself campaigning less and less and focusing more on statecraft and the expansion of Cusco and the royal estates. His son, Topa Inca, had proven himself to be an able general and skilled strategist. With each success, Topa Inca was granted ever-increasing responsibilities and recognition for his achievements. Succeeding his father in 1471 AD, Topa Inca could not have been handed a stronger empire. Cusco had been fully renovated, embracing its role as the capital of a new empire called Tawantinsuyu, or Land of the Four Parts. Great sites such as Machu Picchu had been constructed, but also lesser projects such as the estates at Pisac, Ollantaytambo, and Palacta had been completed. Storehouses of food and rest stops dotted the landscape, supplying the state's armies and messenger runners as they moved from city to city. Perhaps greatest of all, Pachacuti had put in place a clear framework for later Sapa Incas to grow and consolidate the imperial heartland. By the time the Inca faced their first serious rival in the form of the Chimu, they had become the principal power in the region. This was all due to Pachacuti's strategy, which allowed the Incas to scale to an enormous size, eclipsing their enemies in both population and resources under their command. As historian John Howland Rowe writes, nowhere did they find another state capable of meeting them on equal terms, for by the time they came into conflict with the Chimu kingdom on the north coast, the Inca were already too powerful. When his son Topa Inca eventually defeated the Chimu, capturing their king and absorbing their lands, Pachacuti's empire stood without peer in the Andes.